In the battle for the heart, Jesus gives us a great principle found in Matthew chapter 6. If you have your Bibles, open those to Matthew chapter 6. If you're on electronic form, flip down to Matthew 6, because we're going to look very quickly at three things that will help us win the victory, win the battle for your heart. And understanding this, that as we approach his word, we are a church that loves to teach truth. And so as we look at this truth this morning, I want you to approach this with such an open mind, because there's so many, as soon as we say the word giving or tithing, some people immediately just turn me off, okay? We're gonna teach a biblical principle of what Jesus teaches us about investing this morning. Matthew chapter 6 says this: do not store up for yourselves, verse 19, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That is the battle for the heart. That is the approach to allowing Jesus to not only control your life and your mind, but also your heart. And he says it right here, he teaches us three things. First of all, an investment strategy. Verses 19 through 20 say that I want you to invest your time, your talent, and your treasures in things that are eternal. He says where moth and rust don't destroy, where thieves don't break in and steal, I want you to invest what you have in what is eternal, in what will last for an eternity. Yesterday, as we celebrated my mom's life, she loved precious moments, those little figurines. In fact, we have probably 1,000 of them. We have no idea what to do with them, okay? Because they're everywhere. And I don't think my dad loves them, so we're ready. If you're a collector, I can make you a really good deal. We've all taken 10 that we love, and there's still hundreds left, all right? And you think about, what am I investing in? And my sweet little 5-year-old cousin said, well, Aunt Sandy gets to take those. And I said, no, she doesn't get to take those to heaven. We have to deal with them here. So you think about, Jesus says where moth and rust don't destroy and where thieves don't break in. Here's the other thing. Is it eternal? Can you take it with me? Can you take it with you? Can you take it? Are we investing our time, our talents, and our treasures on things that we will live with eternally? That's the investment strategy. This is what Jesus is saying. If you had $50,000 right now to invest, and you went to your investment broker and you asked him or her, you said, you know what, I got this 50 grand. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm gonna remodel my apartment. And he or she would say, what, your apartment that you own? Oh, no, my building, my little room that I'm renting. I'm gonna redo the floors, I'm gonna bring in new appliances, I'm gonna redo the countertops. He would say, you're a fool if you're investing $50,000 in a rental apartment. Said, because it doesn't last, you get no return on your investment. And Jesus is saying, when you invest your time, talent, and treasure in things that moth and rust will destroy, that thieves can break in and steal, then you are a fool. Because this life, this body, all of my positions, all of my possessions, it's a rental. This isn't my home. This isn't what I should be investing all of my efforts in. This is simply a rental. And when we look at what we're investing in, do we invest in the things that are eternal or temporal? Things that build God's kingdom or things that build our own individual kingdoms? Are we investing our time? Are we investing our talents, our abilities, our efforts? And are we investing our treasures in areas where moth and rust cannot destroy? And I've thought a lot about it. 2021 has been a strange year. We've had accidents, we've had tragedies, we've had death. I've done personally 5 funerals in 2021. There have been years where I haven't done 5 in a year. And here we're ending February with 5. I have been thinking about what we invest in eternally. What can we take with us? What can we celebrate building God's kingdom? And Jesus says this, it's simple. You invest in the eternal, where moth and rust don't destroy, where thieves cannot break in and steal. And then he gives this, that's kind of your principle. That's your strategy. Let's look at the principle. The principle is in this, and we say it all the time, but I think we mishear it or misunderstand it. And it's in verse 21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I think we get those backed up. I think we get them confused. I think where my heart is, my treasure is going to follow. You know what? If I love Tiffany with all of my heart and she has my heart, well, then all of a sudden my treasures will follow. My time, my talent, my efforts, my ability, my money will all go toward her. Jesus says that's not the way it is. Jesus, who knew your heart, knew my heart. He said, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will follow. The things that are valuable to you, the things that are most important to you in your life, your heart follows along. It's not, man, I love Jesus, so then, of course, everything else is going to fall into him. It's that when you seek him first, when he is your priority, when he is your number one, then everything else will fall into place. If you treasure Jesus, if you treasure the eternal investments that you make in him, then your heart will follow along. The more that you spend, the more that you invest, the more that you live for him on a day-to-day basis, the more that your heart will be victorious in being owned by, controlled by, and loving the Lord. That is the principle. Where your treasures are, your heart will follow. So we can easily look, I can ask you how much you prayed in the year 2020. I can ask you how much you served. I can ask you, those are so difficult to measure. But as the bailiffs, we can look at our statements. What have we invested in? How much time have I invested in that which is eternal? How much of our money, what God has blessed us with to be stewards, how much of that have we returned and invested in the eternal efforts of building God's kingdom? That is measurable. So when I want to see where your heart is, I can look at your bank statement. I can look at your weekly calendar to see how much of a priority is service and worship and church. I can look at those things. Those are measurable areas of your life that we can look at. So where is your treasure? Because wherever your treasure is, whatever is valuable to you, whatever is important to you, whatever is a priority in your life, your heart will follow suit. Treasure the eternal. Invest your time, your talent, your treasures in that which is eternal. That's your principle. And then he finishes it up with this easy result. The result comes in verse 24, and it says this: no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. Now, he could have stopped right there, because we have lots of masters in our lives. It could be work, it could be family, it could be pleasure, our hobbies, could be. He doesn't stop there. He knows 2,000 years later what will be in a battle for your heart. He knows what you will struggle with. And he says this: you cannot serve God and wealth. He says, I know what the battle's gonna be like, not only in the first century, not only in the 10th and 12th and 14th. I know for an eternity until he comes back on this earth, what will be in a battle for your heart, and it's wealth. It is my possessions. Am I going to pour into that which is eternal, or am I going to invest all of my time, my talents, my treasures in that which is temporal, which is simply a rental? He says multiple times, I want you to make sure that I am your priority. And this is the key that you need to understand. God doesn't want your money. He wants your heart. And in this battle for your heart and for my heart, he understands that it is our wealth, it is our possessions, it is materialism that will get in the way of him owning and being the priority of your heart. And so he says, you know what? Because of that, I'm gonna establish an opportunity for you to give back to me that which was already mine. God has blessed us. And so we need to understand that the reason that he has established a giving system, because he wants us to be generous and faithful with our giving isn't because he needs our money or this church needs our money. It's because he wants your heart. And he knows that that may be the number one thing battling for your heart. That he may not be number one priority in your life because you're chasing that which is temporal. I cannot stand the prosperity gospel. Something the last 25 or 30 years has been on the increase. Preachers who stand up and say, if you put $100 in the plate, then God will bless you with 1,000 in return. I can't stand it because it's leading people astray, but I really can't stand it because it makes the Bible-believing, Bible-teaching, truth-honoring churches swing the pendulum away from God's blessing. I don't like it because I'm afraid to stand up here and say, when you give faithfully and generously, God will bless you. Because I maybe get clumped into that group that's the name it and claim it health and wealth gospel. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying this. If we reap sparingly, if we reap generously, God blesses. It's not a formula. It's not if you give this, then God's gonna bless you financially this way. It is that when I am generous and I am faithful in giving, God always blesses me. Maybe not monetarily, but maybe monetarily. God blesses me eternally. And so when I give, you know what I'm really trying to do? I'm trying to increase my portfolio. It doesn't matter when we pass and graduate from this earth into eternal heaven, what we leave here. But I can invest in the eternal portfolio. I can invest in the people, in the life change, in the growth, in the opportunity, in the relationships, that when I get to heaven, that I get to hear those amazing words, well done, my good and faithful servant. Well done, you invested in your eternal portfolio instead of your earthly, temporal wealth. And I know that when I give and when I'm faithful to give, that God always increases my eternal portfolio. And if he does my temporal, glory to God. And if he doesn't, glory to God. I'm not called to say, I'm gonna invest this and reap this benefit here on this earth. I'm called to be a faithful and a generous giver. Why? So that God can have my heart. Because the more I give, the more that I'm generous, the more that I see how much God can take my little that I give to him and make it much in his kingdom. I am blessed eternally. Last week we didn't have church. We do what we do when we don't have church. We send 14 emails, 7 texts, Facebook. You got them. Most of you got them. But just in case you live in a bubble and you're not on social media, or maybe your power was out and you couldn't check anything, we put pastors at all of we put staff people at all of our entrances and just hopefully smiling faces, gracious faces to say, sorry you came. We're doing church online. Go home and follow it online. And at our Woodway campus, we put people, there's several entrances. They have much more difficult time because it's such an odd campus, large and different points of entry. We had a lady named Jana Losian. She was working kind of the Woodway Village entrance, and she's standing there telling people, sorry, we're not having church. And she sees a man walking across the street, a couple hundred yards away, dressed in a suit. And she said, oh man, this guy has taken the bus here because there's a bus stop across the street. And he's walking to church. And she thought, I'm gonna just go meet him halfway. So she started walking and met him midway in the parking lot. She said, oh, I'm so sorry that you didn't get the message. We're not having church. And he was very gracious. He was a young guy, 30s, which is young, super young. And he was very gracious. And she said, did you take the bus? He said, actually, I took 3 buses. He says, I take 3 buses to get here every Sunday I can. He says, right now, I just can't come a lot because I'm out of work because of COVID, and I'm living with my mom because I'm just not making up, and I'm working any odd job I can get. His name's Tim, and Tim says, And so the last few weeks, I've had odd jobs on Sunday, and I just can't pass them up because I need the money. And she said, totally understand it. And he goes, I'm going to go home, and I'm going to worship online. I got a phone. I can do that. And he turns around to walk back to the bus stop, and he stops, and he said, Miss. She comes back and said, yeah. He says, can you do something for me? She said, sure. He pulls out of his Bible several offering envelopes. He says, can you see that this gets to the offering? And she said, absolutely. See that guy over there? He's one of our security guards. His name is Tim as well. I'm going to give it to him, and he's going to go drop it off. He said, thank you so much. For the first time that I know in 40 plus years, Dr. Young looked at an offering. Dr. Young called him on stage last night. Because this man who was doing odd jobs, walking dogs and working custodial and doing anything that could pay the bills, Dr. Young brought him on stage and handed him those envelopes and said, you want to read those for us? He said, yeah. He said, I will. He said, this week right here, I worked 3 jobs. I was able to work this much, and I made $255. And so in cash in here, there's $25.50. Then he flipped to the next one. He said, this was a good week. He said, I worked several jobs this week and got paid $480, and there's $48 and so cents in this envelope. That's faithful and generous giving. That inspired me. Man, am I giving out of obligation? Am I giving out of habit? Am I giving out of worship and adoration because God saved me and he has my heart? And the amazing thing is Tim got a new job. I believe he's going to work for Second. I can tell you last Sunday morning doing worship online, I was frustrated. It's like, man, God, why? We missed in 2020, and now we're starting off with freezes and chaos. Man, I just missed church. But we would have never known about the faithful and generous giving of Tim. I would have never been challenged that, you know what, I need to do more. I need to love God with all that I am. And we as a church family, as Christ followers, need to make sure that our treasure is where moth and rust don't destroy, where thieves cannot break in and steal, that we are investing in our eternal portfolio, and that everything that we have here is just stuff. And when we celebrate one's life, we celebrate the eternal and not the temporal. May we be found faithful and generous in the way that we handle what God has blessed us with. I've said this multiple times. I don't even know where I heard it. I can do so much more with 90 or 85% of God's money than I can 100% of mine. And so tithing is established so that we can show God where my treasure is. There my heart will be also.